All right, let's talk about the one topic that's on everybody's mind. I mean, I can't get away from it. Every Sunday, I try to figure out what I'm going to open the show with, and there's only one topic to talk about, and that's inflation. I mean, it is really starting to get quite severe. It's really hurting many, many families, not only here in the United States, but all around the world. Inflation is the big story. We have food inflation, we have energy inflation, and we have the war to talk about. We have markets to talk about. We have Washington, things going on there, budgets and stuff like that to talk about. So a lot of things happening, a lot of things to cover on our 2 hour program. So sit tight. This week, I was last Sunday. I went to Staten Island to see my son's new house. Him and his wife just bought a new house, and I was driving home Monday morning with my wife, and we were passing a rest stop in Forked River here, and they were changing the price of gasoline. And the guy was out there in his truck, and he's changing it. Now, the week before, Thursday before this Monday, prices went from $3.73 to $4.09 overnight. Just an unprecedented one-day increase in the price of gasoline. So he's changing the numbers, and I'm thinking we're going to go from 409 to maybe 413, 414, 415. He changed the number to 429. And I was like, Sue, look at this. Look at that sign. They just raised it 20 cents overnight. You know, usually when they change gas price, it's a penny, it's 2 pennies, you know, it moves like that. And I couldn't believe it. I said, well, let's see the Wawa by our house. Oh, Wawa by our house was even higher. And I was like, oh my God, this is crazy what's going on. And it's sticker shock to people. It's in your face. You know, they can lie to us about everything in the media, and they do. We'll talk about the corrupt media later in the program and how don't trust anything you hear from them. But, you know, you can only, the one thing about inflation is we live it. You can't lie to us about it. We all fill up our gas tank, and everywhere we drive, you see a gas station, there's the price in your face. So there's no way for the media to spin it. There's no way for the administration to spin it. We have major inflation, not only in the United States, but worldwide. And this is something you better get used to because it's not going away anytime soon. For a number of reasons I'm going to lay out to you. And the most pressing inflationary issue right now is energy. I mean, this is something that we've never seen before. We have record high energy prices. Now here in New Jersey, you know, we're looking at 450. I was on the Parkway today. It was 450. 449 and 9/10 of a cent. What's with the 9/10 of a cent anyway? Who are they trying to fool? I mean, that 1/10 of a cent means, yeah, okay, it's not 450 a gallon. It's 449 and 9/10 of a penny. It's 450. Let's stop playing with us. Retailers love to do that. You know, we all do it. We list our house for sale. It's $399.5. We don't want to put $400,000 on it. Products are always going to be $39.90, $95. You know, they don't want to put $40 on it. But I think we're smarter than that. But again, we have in-your-face inflation, whether it's groceries, whether it's energy, everything is going up in costs. And like I said, this is something we better get used to. And it's changing people's lives. This week it was announced the Consumer Price Index came out, year over year up 7.9%, the highest we've seen in 40 years. Consumer prices are rising at their fastest pace in 40 years. The highest since January 1982. Now, that's 40 years ago. So if you're not 40 years or older, you don't even know what inflation is. Because we've had such a long period of moderate to low inflation. So this is the 21st straight month of month over month, non-transitory, by the way, they wanted to tell us that, increases in consumer prices, with energy dominating. And as I said last week, we were talking about inflation, we were talking about energy. Energy feeds into everything. When you have energy inflation, you have general inflation. They go together. Because it takes energy to do everything, to make everything. It takes energy to mine raw materials that go into products that are manufactured in factories. It takes energy for that. It takes energy to ship the product. It takes energy to light the grocery store. It takes energy or oil to make all kinds of products. So when you see energy prices going up, that means everything's going up because everything is related to energy. And it has tangential effects. If you're spending more on energy, you're spending less on consumer goods. How many people are making lifestyle changes because of gas prices? Think about it. I mean, gas prices are up 80 cents like in a week. On a 20-gallon tank, you're talking about $16 difference. I mean, that's huge. How about a husband and wife, middle-class people? If they're middle class, they're probably just getting by. The majority of middle-class people are living paycheck to paycheck. And what does it do to them when they're driving an hour each way to go to work? Just do the math. How much more money is going into the gas tank? And where is that money going to be taken away from? If you are on a limited budget, it's a zero-sum game. Otherwise, you're going into debt, and many people are doing that. One of the news things I read this week is that we're seeing more and more people using credit cards to fill up their gas tank versus debit cards. Well, what's the difference? The difference is you're using your own money with a debit card, and if you're using a credit card, you're borrowing money to fill your tank up. And we're seeing a very disturbing trend where people are using credit cards to fill their car. And that could be $70 a fill up, $75, depending on the size of your gas tank and the size of your vehicle. But as we will report to you later in the program, the White House doesn't seem too concerned about it. We need renewable energy and we have to lower our dependence on oil. So just suck it up. It's almost like they're gleeful, the left in this country. They want you to pay more to fill up. They want you to feel the pain because they want you to get away from fossil fuels. It's that simple. Otherwise, the administration would open up pipelines, they would open up drilling and all this stuff. And we'll talk about the deflection, how the administration wants to take no responsibility for the inflation that we're living through right now. So we have the consumer price index up, let's call it 8%, 7.9. It's actually double that. So, whenever they report, just double it. Because John Williams, the economist at shadowstats.com, which I subscribe to, he calculates inflation like it was calculated 40 years ago in 1980. And his calculation is 16%, which is exactly what it was in 1982 when Paul Volcker, then Federal Reserve Chairman, raised interest rates to 20%. Here we are at 0%. And the Fed's talking a game that, they're going to start raising rates. Oh, my God. They're going to meet this coming week. And they're going to start increasing interest rates. How much are they going to increase it? 0.25%, most likely. That's what the market expects, which is nothing. You go from 0 to 0.25%. That is not fighting inflation. That is a symbolic move that will do nothing. It'll make mortgage rates go up 0.25 point. It'll make financing our debt and deficit a little higher. But it'll do nothing. For the Fed to actually raise interest rates enough to battle inflation, it would be so aggressive in interest rate increases that it would just destroy the economy, destroy financial markets, which are in the process now of self-destructing anyway. We'll touch on that in a second. Boy, if you have money in the market, you better really reassess what you're doing. So the majority of Americans are making lifestyle changes because there's no choice. People aren't driving as much. They're trying to use, one trip to do multiple things. New research from your Denny Research estimates the average household will spend an additional $2,000 per year in gasoline, on top of an extra $1,000 to $1,500 on food. So add this all up, and a typical household will spend about $3,500 less this year on other things because they're paying more for food and energy. That's very bad for the economy because the consumer is 70% of the economy. So if the consumer is going to pull back in other areas of their lives, that's going to hurt corporate earnings and so forth. It's not going to be long before we see $5 at the pump. My cousin lives in Oakland, California. He sent me a text. He took a picture of the price of gas at the gas station by him. It was over $7. It's just incredible. So people are doing what they used to do in the 80s. I mean, I remember back in the day when, gas prices were so high. You went anywhere, everybody chipped in for gas. Because that's how expensive it was relative to, it was probably $1 a gallon, when it used to be 50 cents. But now, how about boaters? That's what I think about. Boat gasoline for boats is about $1 higher than for cars. It's going to cost $6 to a gallon. You fill a 200-gallon tank. Do the math. I'm kind of glad I sold my boat a couple of years ago because I don't want to fill it up. So record gas prices are definitely starting to bite consumers who are starting to cut back on other things. Between food and groceries and energy, there's not a whole lot left. People are canceling vacations that they were going to go on this summer. They just feel that they can't afford to do that right now. And this will filter through to the economy. War is not helping. Things are obviously very bad in Ukraine. Russia seems hell-bent on the scorched earth method of war that they're doing now. They're throwing everything conventionally out the window, and they're indiscriminately bombing civilians. And it's a real bad story in Ukraine, and it looks like Russia's not backing down. It's causing all kinds of ripple effects. With inflation, and we have energy inflation, we have food inflation. Russia and Ukraine produce 25% of the wheat. They're saying now that they're not going to export any of it. Ukraine is saying that. Russia's saying that. Well, that's going to really hurt Northern Africa that gets most of their wheat and grain from Ukraine and Russia. So we're going to see famine. We're going to start seeing now not only the cost of food going up, the availability of food going down. Also, half of the world's population gets food as a result of fertilizer. And now we're seeing Russia is keeping their fertilizer to themselves. And they're only selling fertilizer to quote-unquote friendly nations. Russia is the #1 producer of fertilizer in the world. And that's another topic. We rely so much on other countries for our well-being. And these countries are not the friendliest countries to the United States. We've done this to ourselves, whether it's China, whether it's Russia. We don't produce anything anymore. We have to have it manufactured somewhere else. We're the breadbasket of the world. Why don't we make our own fertilizer here in the United States? Why are we relying on Russia to get fertilizer? Why are we relying on Russia to get oil? Or Saudi Arabia? Why are we relying on China to produce our drugs, our vitamins, transistors, chips, everything? And what we see happening now, we're seeing the world split. We had a relatively world economy. Yeah, we had communist countries, we had dictatorial countries, we had China, we had Russia, but it was still a world economy. Now what we're seeing happening here through this war is we're seeing the splitting of the world. 2 blocks. You're going to have Europe, United States, and you're going to have China, Russia, Iran, Venezuela. So we're seeing the country split into 2 blocks. And that's going to turn into trading blocks, which is very, very bad for the United States as well as other countries, because those countries, Russia and China, produce a lot of the things that we need. And we could do a whole show on how we got there. And it's happened over decades as companies became greedy and decided to ship manufacturing overseas, pay slave labor, and now we don't make anything here in the United States. And now we're dependent on China and Russia and other countries, which can't end well for us. Cooking oil shortage sparks panic buying in Indonesia. Okay, so we're talking inflation and we're talking price rises. That's one thing. Now availability, and that's another thing. It's one thing if you cost more to buy something, at least you could buy it. If you have the money, you can buy it, you can adjust your budget. But if it's not there and there's nothing to buy, now you got a real problem. And that's where we're going. That's what we're going to see in the months ahead. Indonesia, the world's largest exporter of cooking oil, will reduce exports of edible oils as a domestic shortage sparks panic hoarding among households. A sign of rising protectionism around the world as countries deal with record high food prices. So this is what's going to happen. Countries are going to start keeping this stuff for themselves, and world trade is going to break down. And that's what happens when you have shortages of anything. They say, wait a second, why should we export something that we may need? So the number one producer of oil, cooking oil, which is Indonesia, is going to keep 30% of what they manufacture within the country itself versus 20% previously. So that takes 10% of oil off the market, cooking oil. Their big oil is palm oil, and I'm looking at a chart of the price. Back in 1920, the index was 2,000. Now it's 7,500. 300% increase. And because of the monkey wrench that's been thrown in food supply chains due to the war, governments are beginning to take proactive measures that are considered protectionist. And they're trying to safeguard their own food supply. So they're saying, okay, we're not going to ship this to you, America. We're going to keep it for ourselves. Only 18% of Americans say their wages are keeping pace with inflation. Will Biden blame this on Putin too? Everything's Putin's fault now. This is exactly what the administration wanted. Now they have a scapegoat. They could say they have nothing to do with inflation. It's all on Putin, and we'll play some audio clips later on in the program to illustrate just that. But across all income levels, 18% of consumers said their wages were keeping pace with higher costs of living. And that's one of the things that the administration has been trying to tout, that wages have been going up. But real wages, when you take the percent increase in wages minus the percent increase in consumer prices, you have negative real wages. So if I'm making $10 more, but I'm spending $20 more on the same stuff, am I actually making more money? Yeah, nominally I am, but really I'm not. Most people, 62%, surveyed said inflation had affected their spending. 38% of consumers said they tried to spend less by cutting non-essential spending and canceling or putting off trips. And 42% said they either saved less, tapped into savings, borrowed money, or took out a loan. So very, 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 very tough times for the average family. Thankfully, in America, we still get by, most of us. But in third world countries, that's really where the problem lies. And that's where we're going to see starvation, famine, probably social unrest, political unrest. If you recall, the Arab Spring, I think that was 2010, when we had uprisings in different countries, mainly in Africa, it started and so forth. That was not a political event. that was based on inflation, food inflation. They say when inflation causes groceries, food, to exceed 50% of your take-home budget, that's when social unrest becomes prevalent. And for many countries, we're there. People may be pretty docile up to a point, but once they can't feed their children, now you got a real problem. So inflation is a big issue, and it's continuing. It's something that is not going away anytime soon. The Fed's doing nothing to battle inflation. They talk a good game, but they're not going to do enough to make any difference whatsoever. And whatever choice they make is going to be the wrong one, because if they battle inflation, they'll have to raise interest rates so much that it will destroy financial markets, and it will destroy the economy. And it'll increase the debt service on U.S. government debt, which right now averages about 1.5% to 2%. If that goes up 1%, that's $300 billion more in interest. Every 1%. So how could the Federal Reserve raise interest rates, raise the cost of borrowing for everybody, including the federal government? They can't. So they'll make a symbolic rise this week. They'll talk in the future about, we're going to watch inflation very closely, and, we'll do what it takes to battle it, blah, blah, blah. But in reality, they're going to do just the very, very minimum to look like they're doing something. And they're between a rock and a hard place. They've painted themselves in a corner. They've left interest rates low for so long. They've stoked inflation. And we have a perfect storm right now. You could say inflation is because of the war in Russia. You could say inflation is due to supply chains, due to COVID. But inflation, the bottom line of inflation is it's a monetary event. Inflation always preceded by printing of money, by expanding the money supply. And after the break, I'll talk about how the money supply in the United States has grown over the last 100 years and what it means in the way of price increases. So you could blame everything. It's government spending, the stimulus that we've gone through over the last couple of years, the trillions of dollars that have been spent that we don't have, the trillions of dollars that have been printed by the Federal Reserve to fund our debt and deficits. And then you have a war now, and you just got a perfect storm of inflation and shortages and a very, very dismal future for not only the United States but the world. And it's going to be very, very tough times, unfortunately. I hate to be gloom and doom, but it is what it is. And how quickly this war gets over, it will have something to do with it. Hopefully it won't expand to something worse. And my fears are growing every day that it will. It just seems that, cooler heads are not prevailing here. It seems that, Putin is hell-bent on putting together the Soviet Union. And at least he's hell-bent on destroying Ukraine and taking it by any means possible, which really can't be good for the future of the world. Let's take a break. You want to be part of the program? You have a financial question, or you want to just chime in on anything that's going on? 732-237-9626, 237-9626. My name is Lou Scatigna. You're listening to The Financial Physician right here on 92.7 WOBN.